It begins the way every folktale begins, with the illusion of safety. A hearth, a circle of listeners, a moral lesson delivered in the voice of someone older, someone trusted. A fool stumbles toward truth, a child laughs at a clever twist, a family repeats the tale as though it belongs to the air itself. We remember these moments as comfort, as warmth. But memory is deceptive. If you listen carefully, the rhythm fractures. There is a subtle catch in the laughter, a crack in the cadence. Something moves in the silence between words, something not meant for children, not meant for comfort. These were never bedtime stories. They were maps. And every map leads somewhere. Follow them too closely, and the wisdom dissolves into warning. The town of Chelm is remembered as a place of holy fools, where rabbis debated nonsense and peasants confused the obvious. Their stories live in books, in classrooms, in children's anthologies. Harmless humor, we are told. Harmless, always harmless. Yet one story refuses to fade, the villagers trapping moonlight in a barrel. On the surface, a joke about ignorance. Beneath it, a ritual of containment, a memory of binding light inside darkness. Folklorists laugh. But the imagery persists, a circle of men, a vessel, an attempt to capture something that should never be held. It sounds less like comedy, and more like an occult experiment retold until it was safe to repeat without suspicion. The power of these tales lies not in their words, but in their familiarity. Nostalgia is a soft weapon. It lowers defenses. It makes us accept without question what we have heard since childhood. The cadence of a parable, the repeated phrases, the rhythm of its conclusion, creates trust even when the message is hollow. And that trust blinds us. What feels familiar conceals what is hidden. Every recycled motif is not just tradition, it is encryption. A phrase designed to pass through centuries unaltered, carrying signals no one remembers how to read. On forgotten corners of the internet, the whispers grow louder. Threads on conspiracy forums, fragments on Reddit, comments buried under years of silence. They aren't lessons, they're instructions. Some users dissect the Chelm tales line by line, claiming coordinates, coded directions, instructions hidden in metaphors. Others insist the stories weren't born from human imagination at all, that they were given, delivered, seeded into culture as a kind of programming language. The arguments are frantic, obsessive, dismissed by most as paranoia. Yet they keep resurfacing like an infection that cannot be cured. Because something is wrong with their survival. Unlike myths that evolve, mutate, fracture into variants across centuries, these wisdom tales remain eerily stable. Their punchlines rarely change. Their structure resists decay. Folklorists call this consistency a miracle of oral tradition. Skeptics call it coincidence. But the pattern feels unnatural. It feels deliberate. Stories should shift like languages do, like rivers bending around stones. But here, across time and culture, the same lines return. The same endings reappear. The same foolish characters laugh at the same failures. And when something survives unchanged, the question is never how. The question is always why. Imagine a story designed not to entertain but to endure. Not to teach but to infect. Imagine a story built like a virus, simple, repeatable, coded to replicate through memory itself. You carry it with you even when you no longer recall the words. You tell it to your children. They tell it to theirs. The shell looks harmless, comedy, wisdom, moral guidance. But inside, something else moves, waiting. And so the laughter of Chelm begins to sound different. The comfort of bedtime tales begins to taste metallic. The stories we thought were meant to make us wise may only have been designed to make us obedient, or distracted, or afraid. Perhaps they are not stories at all, but instructions written in riddles, waiting for the right listener to unlock them. The haunting question lingers, heavier with every retelling. Who first told them? Who ensured their survival? And what message, buried in their rhythm, have we been carrying forward without ever knowing? Every culture buries its secrets in laughter. A tale repeated enough times becomes harmless, its edges worn down by amusement. But in the archive, the laughter grows brittle. The paper does not smile, the ink does not forget. Pages shift against one another like mismatched bones. A line that should be there is missing. A detail that belonged in one version has vanished from the next. The past begins to read less like memory and more like a redacted document, scrubbed clean of something no one wanted preserved. Scholars point to the contradictions as if they are accidents of transcription. But the gaps are too neat, too precise. Archive.org scans of early collections show breaks in sentences where nothing should be missing, notes in the margins from scribes who copied faithfully until a particular symbol, a particular phrase, was crossed out. The handwriting stutters. The flow of words falters. And then, silence before the story resumes. Like a tape abruptly edited. Like evidence cut away before it could be reviewed. What if the tales were not collected for preservation, but for containment? Consider how intelligence agencies release documents under FOIA, not to reveal, but to manage. Whole paragraphs blacked out. Names erased. Dates missing. The shape of the truth is there, but its substance has been carved away. Folkloric archives begin to look eerily similar, their neat volumes hiding a pattern of omissions. Someone did not want the whole story remembered. And still, fragments slip through. Phrases referring to the wise, disguised as fools. Allegories that place hidden knowledge in the mouths of clowns. The line between laughter and initiation blurs. Was the jester meant to entertain or to signal? Was the fool's mistake really a cipher, disguising truth so dangerous it had to hide behind ridicule? The omissions start to feel deliberate, not errors of memory, but edits made with precision, ensuring that only the safe versions survived. Which leaves us with dread, because the archive begins to feel less like a record of the past and more like evidence of an erasure. Someone removed more than they preserved. And the question presses harder with every gap in the page. If what remains is harmless, then what was taken away? And why did someone believe it could never be allowed to survive? A story is never just a story. It is a device, a machine hidden inside language. Every sentence is a gear, every pause a lever, every ending a programmed conclusion. On the surface it feels harmless, comedy, tradition, folklore. But beneath the rhythm, you can hear the turning of something colder. The tale doesn't simply entertain you. It calibrates you. It sets boundaries around your imagination. It tells you where laughter is permitted and where despair is inevitable. Once you notice it, the illusion crumbles. Stories stop being mirrors of wisdom and begin to look like tools of obedience. The machinery hums beneath the words, producing the same emotion, the same silence, again and again. In the sterile language of research, you find strange confirmations. A paper buried in the AR-14 archive tracks how conspiracy conversations evolve online. They often begin with curiosity, with playful speculation. But then, almost predictably, they degrade into cycles of fear and hostility. Laughter fades into suspicion. Discussion collapses into paranoia. This psychological spiral is mapped like a formula. And when you lay that formula over traditional parables, the resemblance is uncanny. Many begin with lightness, with humor, with the seeming foolishness of a character. But they rarely resolve in joy. They dissolve into futility, humiliation, despair. The audience is left not enlightened, but resigned. The laughter curdles. The wisdom becomes dependence. Some researchers call this narrative conditioning. A subtle programming where the cadence of a joke disarms the listener, while the bleak ending anchors itself in the subconscious. Reddit threads obsess over this pattern. Users post line-by-line dissections of parables, claiming they function like algorithms. One speculates that the repetition of punchlines is not just coincidence, but an early form of feedback loop. A joke told in Poland, another in Russia, another in Yemen. Different costumes, different characters, yet the same mechanical turn of events. Each version arrives at the same inevitable conclusion: the fool cannot win. The wise cannot change anything. The listener cannot escape the cycle. This is not how stories normally evolve. Oral tradition is messy. Myths mutate, characters transform, endings fragment. Yet wisdom tales repeat with almost digital accuracy. The same phrases survive intact for centuries. The same motifs reappear across continents. It feels less like diffusion and more like distribution, like someone wanted these structures replicated exactly, their emotional impact preserved across languages and generations. The punchlines operate like code, compressed into memory, immune to distortion. And repetition does something to the human mind. Psychologists have studied it for decades. Repetition does not just reinforce memory, it engraves emotional response. It binds fear to laughter, shame to recognition, confusion to silence. If you are told the same story in enough forms, you stop analyzing it. You internalize it. It becomes part of the architecture of thought itself. And then the parable machine no longer needs to run. It has already installed itself inside you. On late-night forums, some speculate openly, were these stories the first primitive software of mass programming? Were they designed not to teach morality, but to instill patterns of obedience, dependency, helplessness? If the tales are algorithms, then who wrote them? Who decided that every fool must fail, every lesson must end in futility, every listener must be returned to the same cage of laughter and despair? And this is where the dread takes root. Because once you glimpse the machine, you begin to feel it in every sentence. The rhythm of the tale stops feeling natural and starts feeling inevitable. The laughter no longer belongs to you. It belongs to the engine that produced it. And if the same endings echo across centuries, across continents, across cultures, then maybe the parables were never meant to teach at all. Maybe they were meant to program. And maybe they already have. When the moral is stripped away, what remains? Not wisdom. Not clarity. Only silence. And in that silence, something louder begins to pulse, the outline of what was removed. A folk tale without its ending is not an innocent fragment, it is a wound. Every omission whispers like a redaction in a classified file, daring you to imagine what was cut. What looks like nonsense, what looks like laughter, begins to resemble something darker. A confession half spoken, half erased. And the skeleton of truth stares back through the gaps, daring you to notice. At first glance, the stories feel harmless. Harmless enough to sit in children's books, harmless enough to be anthologized as quaint pieces of national humor. But the deeper you dig, the more you see the seams, sections missing, morals reduced to vague clichés, endings that no longer resolve but collapse into nothing. Archive.org scans reveal these scars clearly. Entire paragraphs replaced by ellipses, pages smudged into illegibility, translations that leave out symbols altogether. The act feels deliberate, not accidental. Someone didn't simply forget these details, they cut them out. They sterilized them. They left behind safe fragments while burying the dangerous marrow. It is impossible to look at these omissions without recalling the methods of censorship. A redacted FBI file, a CIA document with entire pages blacked out, a report where only the connective tissue survives but the meaning has been surgically removed. Folklore begins to look like a softer version of the same strategy, a narrative sanitized until it is inert. The fool remains a fool, the laughter remains, but the hidden meaning, the dangerous pulse, vanishes. What we inherit is a hollow performance. A copy of a copy, drained of power. And this connects to a larger tactic. In the modern world, the phrase conspiracy theory acts as a shield. Label something a conspiracy, and you have dismissed it without ever engaging with its evidence. Philosopher Charles Pigden dissected this maneuver, calling it a systematic form of denial. But long before conspiracy theory existed, there was another label, folklore. To call a tale folklore is to lock it in a museum case. It can be laughed at, studied, catalogued, but never believed. Never taken seriously. Never dangerous. The category itself becomes a silencer. What's left behind is not what was intended. Many scholars agree that early versions of folk tales taught resilience, cleverness, rebellion. They gave listeners the courage to endure the cruelty of their world. But by the time they reach us, these morals are distorted. The clever character is punished. The bold character is humiliated. The moral no longer offers hope, it enforces resignation. Generation after generation is fed this new ending, until despair itself feels like tradition. And who benefits when a people are taught not to resist, but to laugh at their own futility? There are haunting parallels here. A whistleblower's testimony cut to pieces before it reaches the public. A religious text edited to erase the most radical passages. A chant or ritual remembered only in fragments, the crucial line missing. Each time, power survives not through what is said, but through what is cut. And in wisdom tales, we are left staring at those cuts. Every blank space is a wound. Every missing moral is a shadow of something too dangerous to tell. And this leads to the darkest suspicion. What if the true moral was never meant to survive? What if the editors of these tales were not negligent scribes, but careful curators, removing the one thing that gave the story its power? What if every bedtime parable, every quaint folktale, is in fact a censored confession, stripped of the one truth that could break the cycle? It is an unsettling thought. That the stories we trusted, the ones read to us in childhood, are not complete. That the morals we laughed at, the lessons we thought we understood, are nothing but shells. And in the silence where the truth should be, something else takes hold. The pressure of absence. The echo of erasure. The unspoken truth that someone, somewhere, decided we could never be allowed to hear. The oldest stories do not die when their tellers are gone. They linger like smoke in a sealed room, refusing to dissipate. They settle into the fabric of memory, embedding themselves even after the words blur, even after the details are forgotten. What survives is not the language, not the paper, but the rhythm, an echo that keeps repeating. And maybe that was always the purpose. Not to be written down, not to be decoded, but to make sure the message lives inside you, carried forward whether you want it or not. In the digital age, the stories mutate but never disappear. On TikTok, fragments of myth are stitched into short clips, half-jokes that spiral into obsessions. On Reddit, threads filled with just folklore metastasize into hundreds of comments, each user reshaping the tale, each retelling sharpening its edges. On YouTube, conspiracy and myth blur into cinematic hauntings, disguised as entertainment but working like rituals. The medium shifts, but the function is the same: infection. A tale is told, retold, remixed until it no longer belongs to anyone, until it simply exists, circulating like a virus with no need for an original host. And the effect on the audience is measurable. Sentiment analysis of online conversations shows the same pattern scholars found in parables. Positivity erodes over time, replaced by unease, paranoia, despair. The joke lands first, then festers. The punchline, once harmless, begins to feel like a curse. Just as the old wisdom stories wore down listeners with repetition and futility, digital folklore does the same. The longer you dwell on it, the heavier it becomes. The more you consume, the less you laugh. The humor collapses into dread. Echo chambers make this effect inescapable. Algorithms amplify the stories that keep us watching. Comments sections amplify the paranoia. Each retelling is more intense than the last, each interpretation more uncanny, each pattern more sinister. The folklore machine doesn't end, it escalates. Like a hall of mirrors, every reflection is warped until you no longer know what the original was, or if there even was one. What survives is not truth, but a shape that feeds itself. And every person who repeats it becomes another carrier. This leads to the final speculation, the most disturbing of all. Maybe the stories were never meant to be understood. Maybe their survival does not depend on meaning at all. They are not puzzles to be solved, but viruses to be transmitted. They do not care if you laugh, if you question, if you dismiss them. They only care that you repeat them. To tell the story is to spread the story. To listen is to become infected. To remember is to ensure it lives another generation. And here lies the emotional cost. Guilt. Obsession. The realization that by listening, by engaging, you are already complicit. The parable has moved into you. You are now a transmitter, a living archive, whether you want to be or not. These stories are not bound to books or screens. They are bound to us. They survive us. They outlive us. And by hearing them now, by letting them echo in your memory, You have already ensured they will outlive you too.